Hello everyone! Welcome to another video from the 4th year of the clown decade. The decade where things are going to get worse before they get better, and we are in the weird middle portion of this decade where we can actually start to see some of the good things occurring from things getting worse. In other words, as Lenin said, push a bayonet in, if you find mush, keep pushing. We are finally finding some mush here. It's just unfortunate it is coming from some of the most flaccid political attacks I have ever seen in my life. Because on April 6th of this year, Labour decided to put out this tweet. Labour is the party of law and order, with a picture of Rishi Sunak. Do you think adults convicted of sexually assaulting children should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. Under the Tories, 4,500 adults convicted of sexually assaulting children under 16 served no prison time. Labour will lock up dangerous child abusers. And that was instantly a case of everybody disliked that. And a big part of typical Labour supporters' problem with this advert was that it basically opened the door for attacks similar to the ones that Boris Johnson was making about a year ago.
This leader of the opposition, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Speaker, he spent most of his time prosecuting journalists and failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile, as far as I can make out, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, the old attack from Boris Johnson to Keir Starmer was that Keir Starmer was head of the CPS while they were refusing to prosecute Jimmy Savile for the allegations of sexual assault. About a year ago, this was in the news for about half a week because everyone was saying, oh, isn't this gutter dirty politics? With Labour supporters typically saying, oh, it's not even true, and that Keir Starmer would have known anything about it, despite the fact that even full fact can't go fully on the defensive for Keir Starmer, with their verdict being Mr. Starmer was head of the CPS when the decision was made not to prosecute Jimmy Savile, but he was not the reviewing lawyer for the case. An official investigation, commissioned later by Starmer, criticised both prosecutors and police for their handling of the allegations. In other words, the best case scenario for Keir Starmer there was that he was criminally negligent about prosecuting a high-profile serial sex offender. And I don't have too much trouble saying things like that anymore, thanks exactly to the tweet like that and the further posters that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have been trying to push in the following weeks. But before we get into that, it is also worth pointing out that one of the best features that Elon Musk has added to Twitter came into great use under this tweet. Readers added context they thought people might want to know. Tweet implies that the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, doesn't support prison sentences for sexual assaults against children. The current sentencing guidelines for this crime has a maximum sentence of 14 years imprisonment, and there is no Conservative Party policy plans to remove this maximum sentencing guideline. And that's not even the end of the fact-checking for this poster, but I'm going to leave that until a little bit later, because Labour's reaction to basically everyone saying this is a terrible idea was to double down. Labour doubles down with second Sunak attack ad, because if there's one thing Labour seems to be terrible at the moment, it is winning at anything. Even though they are so far ahead in the polls at the moment and have been since the whole Boris Johnson being kicked out as PM fiasco, they seem to be doing their best to level the playing field. Labour was accused of dragging down political standards in Britain after claiming that Rishi Sunak was personally to blame for not sending child sex abusers and other criminals to prison. In attack advertisements released on social media, the party highlighted the large number of convicted criminals who escaped jail as evidence that the Prime Minister was soft on crime. But the claims were condemned by the Tories as vile and desperate, while one shadow cabinet minister refused to stand behind the campaign. It was also attacked by Compassion in Politics, an independent campaign group. This kind of political discourse poisons the water that we all must drink from. It drives up hate and drags down standards, said Jennifer Nadell, the organisation's co-director. Sir Keir Starmer has rightfully identified that the public want to see politicians act with respect, dignity and decency. He can start by pulling this ad from circulation and issuing an immediate apology. And I do agree, I think that's exactly what Keir Starmer should have done. So, naturally Keir Starmer did the exact opposite, and instead put out a second campaign ad. 13 years of Tory failure has broken our justice system. Victims wait months, if not years, for justice, while dangerous criminals avoid prison. Labour will prevent crime, punish criminals, and protect communities. Do you think an adult convicted of possessing a gun with intent to harm should go to prison? Rishi Sunak doesn't. Under the Tories, 937 adults convicted of possession of a firearm with intent to harm serve no prison time. Labour will lock up dangerous gunmen. And once again, this advert was dunked on by the community note. This misrepresents PM Rishi Sunak's stance on gun crime. Current legislation and sentencing guidelines in the UK state that imprisonment up to life may happen for any type of gun crime. The Conservative Party has no plans to remove or change this legislation. And once again, generally people's reaction, even Labour supporters' reaction, was to say, this is just bad optics, this is opening the door to things that we have said for a while we don't want the door open to, such as attacking Keir Starmer for not prosecuting Jimmy Savile. And yet, Labour Party HQ seems to have the self-awareness it had during the Corbyn years. Labour attack ads, party glee at triumph of Twitter blitz on Sunak. Well, we will see how long that feeling of triumph lasts. Labour insiders have declared a series of attack ads a triumph after the party avoided spending a single penny on the controversial social media campaign. That's probably because all you needed was a picture of Rishi Sunak and some basic word art skills. The party has clocked 22 million views on Twitter for its original attack ad, claiming that Rishi Sunak thinks paedophiles should be spared jail. I mean, even just saying the words out loud, I don't know why Labour HQ thought it was a good idea. The advert was posted on the party's official profile last week and has the most views of any Twitter post in Labour's history, probably because people wanted to point and laugh at it. It's been followed up with a series of related posts making eye-catching claims about Sunak's record on gun control and his wife's tax status. And the tax status thing is probably actually a fair thing to attack him on. It's just a shame it wasn't the first, and people are only going to really remember the first paedophile one, and then think, Jimmy Savile though. But Labour has not placed the adverts on other social media websites, even though Facebook and Google typically account for the vast majority of online campaign spending during elections. Instead, Labour's Facebook strategy in the run-up to the local elections has focused on voters in marginal councils such as Erewash, Thanet and North East Derbyshire, targeting them with tailored messages about fly tipping and neighbourhood crime. Which is a lot more sensible when it comes to local politics. Don't attack the enemy, show people what you are going to do to help improve their area. The fact that Labour has not run the adverts on Facebook and Google and placed them on Twitter instead suggests the campaign's main audience was in Westminster, or with middle-class morons who have no job, where the controversy on Twitter has attracted plenty of media attention. It has also meant that the party has not had to pay to spread its message to the electorate on Facebook and Google, where they have been able to spend their money on more traditional campaigning. Despite an internal backlash with some of the party questioning the tone of the adverts, senior insiders have declared the campaign a triumph. We knew it would be punchy, but did we expect TV bulletins to be leading with it almost a week later? Of course not. Yes, but the TV bulletins aren't going, yes, this is true, and a very good attack ad on the Tories. What they're saying is, this is awful and not even true. One senior Labour source told The Times, this has been a triumph. We spent a week not talking about boats, not talking about trans or other issues the Conservatives want to talk about. We've been talking about what we want to talk about. Again, a really stupid move, because when it comes to law and order, your Prime Minister was head of the CPS for 5 years. From 2008 to 2013. That's going to be relevant when we fact-check some of these adverts again later, by the way. And I also like the fact that Labour don't want to talk about the boats or the trans issue because they know their own party is terrible when it comes to those debates. And yet when it comes to crime, they think they're better than the Tories for some reason. For clarification, I think they're both awful when it comes to law and order, but I just think it's incredibly laughable that Labour would even try and make out that they're either the party of lower immigration or the party of law and order, both of which they have tried to do recently. Insiders concede that Labour had not originally planned for the adverts to last this long. The original thought was we would put Rishi in the dock over the Tories' record on crime, a source said, but we didn't think this format would flow into other things. Clearly we have found a winning formula. I don't know how they can see the reaction and think that. I genuinely can't. Because in another article 5 days after this one, just 3 days ago on the 16th of April, the article starts off with Labour has taken off the gloves and will double down on attack adverts targeting Rishi Sunak personally, the Shadow Health Secretary has said, where Streeting said the party would release a lot more adverts containing controversial claims about the Prime Minister, even though there is internal unease over the aggressive tactics and criticism from some MPs. So, forget trying to make politics more respectable and trying to be the party of grown-ups or anything like that. We're going to attack Rishi Sunak personally. Even when the personal attacks are true, they typically don't come off well with the British public, so I don't know why they're trying to do this. I mean, the attacks are so bad and so inaccurate that even journalists are doing their job and fact-checking. How accurate are Labour's attack ads? The claims fact-checked. So, first off, we go for the paedophilia one. In the first of the attack adverts released by Labour last week, the party claimed that under the Conservatives, 4,500 adults convicted of sexually assaulting children under 16 served no prison time. The ad relies on Ministry of Justice data, which is accurate from 2010 to the first half of last year, which extends to before Sunak was even an MP, i.e. it's not fair to say this, but also includes a time when Sir Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions and sat on the Sentencing Council, i.e. head of the CPS, which sets sentencing guidelines. In 2012, it set out guidelines suggesting that not all child sex abusers should automatically be jailed. In other words, their first attack ad, which was a triumph and didn't cost them a penny, reflects even worse on Keir Starmer than it would for Rishi Sunak, who has done nothing at all with paedophilia laws in the UK, whereas Sir Keir Starmer, when he was writing out the sentencing guidelines, decided that not all paedophiles should automatically go to jail. That reflects much worse on Starmer than it does for Sunak. It is judges and magistrates who decide on sentences for criminals rather than politicians, but Parliament can set minimum and maximum sentences. Labour claimed the lenient punishments were due, in part, to a problem within the criminal justice system, including case backlogs and crowded prisons. In 2020, according to the Sentencing Academy, the average sentence for sexual assault of a child under 13 in 2020 was 3 years and 8 months, up from 2 years and 3 months in 2010, when Labour were last in power. So the Tories are actually harder on paedophiles than Labour are, where they gradually increased the average sentence for the offence before it peaked in 2019, which obviously we had the pandemic and lockdowns, and there were other issues that they had to take care of. So, in other words, Tories have slowly been putting more and more paedophiles in jail for longer than Labour did. Triumph of an advert, according to Labour. And this gets even worse when it comes to the second poster about gun crime, because similar to the post on sexual assaults on children, the second advert uses Ministry of Justice data. It claims that under Conservatives, 937 adults convicted of possession of firearms with intent to harm did not go to prison. Again, the period covers stretches from 2010 to the first half of last year, implying that basically the same thing has happened. In that Labour have claimed this is Rishi Sunak's fault, actually everything that has got to do with minimum and maximum sentencing had very, very little to do with him, and in fact, the minimum and maximum sentencing guidelines were probably written out by Keir Starmer when he was on the Sentencing Council. So once again, big triumph according to Labour, even though it makes Keir Starmer look very lenient on crime. Which probably explains that after a while they started attacking Rishi Sunak for different reasons, and came out with this poster. Do you think it's right to raise taxes for working people when your family benefited from a tax loophole? Rishi Sunak does. The Tories have raised taxes 24 times since 2019, leaving the British people facing the highest tax burden in 70 years, and they refuse to close the non-dom tax loophole. A Labour government would freeze your council tax this year, paid for by a proper windfall tax on oil and gas giants. According to the fact check, this is a reference to Sunak's wife, Akshata Murthy, who, it was revealed last year, held the special tax status, reportedly saving her millions. She has since said she will pay UK taxes on all her worldwide income. Which, okay, good for now, but bad that you did it in the first place. It is correct to say that the tax burden has increased, the Office of Budget Responsibility said. After last month's budget, the UK's tax burden is set to rise to a post-war high. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has previously said scrapping the non-dom status would be the wrong thing to do in terms of creating jobs in the UK. Which, yes, the idea is just to say you have non-dom status if you are not going to reside in the UK permanently. Which, as a Member of Parliament's wife, you should absolutely say you are going to be permanently in the UK. Further scheduled ads will include one suggesting Sunak thinks it is right that the public is paying for the Conservatives crashing the economy through higher housing costs. Though, of course, they have forgotten to mention that if you do just put a windfall tax on oil and gas giants, that is going to mean that they are going to have to try and make up that money elsewhere, which is going to inevitably mean higher oil and gas prices for people as they try and recover the losses from that windfall tax. And yes, I know a windfall tax only affects profit, but the problem is that if you're just going to increase the cost of providing oil and gas, you are obviously going to raise the price of oil and gas, thanks to the supply curve. But it's pointless trying to teach Labour supporters economics, so I'm not going to bother doing it here. But yes, that was probably their most accurate and best advert, which was basically saying his wife took advantage of a tax loophole while raising taxes. But again, this falls quite flat when the Labour Party keeps saying that the tax rises aren't enough. And there's clearly no plans to cut taxes because Liz Truss wasn't even going to cut taxes, just not raise them. and Labour said, no, this is the absolute worst thing to do, you need to obviously raise taxes. So I don't know what they're trying to attack here. They would have done the exact same thing. In fact, they probably wanted it raising more. And so, after all these adverts and all the fact checkers pointed out that this reflects very badly on Keir Starmer, recent polling has actually shown that most people seem to prefer Sunak to Keir Starmer. And according to a poll from YouGov between April 12th and 13th, the results are as you see on screen. From people who have no party affiliation, it seems that there is a much higher preference for Rishi Sunak than for Keir Starmer, though obviously the overwhelming amount say don't know. For Conservative voters, obviously you see Rishi Sunak with 82% of people thinking he would be better and only 3% thinking Keir Starmer would be better. And then when you look at Labour voters, about the same proportion of Conservative voters who think Keir Starmer would be a good Prime Minister think Rishi Sunak would be a good Prime Minister, and only 69 think Keir Starmer would be a good Prime Minister. Which just goes to show you these ads do not have the desired effect. Generally, polls are still showing that voter intentions is to put a Labour government in, yet these attack ads seem to have pulled that lead from under the rug. Voting intentions have shown a slight upswing for the Conservatives, so please Labour, keep putting these adverts out, because I really don't want you in power. And to those of you who typically say, oh well, Labour and Tory are the same party, no, that's not true, and that's never been true. The problem the Tories have is that they are a broad church of different factions, and one of them is particularly left-wing, and that is the faction that has been dominating the Tory party since David Cameron. And that is a faction that may as well be Labour or Lib Dem. With Labour, they have literal communists all the way from Ash Sarkar all the way to the very left side of the Conservative Party with Keir Starmer. The ones with the communists in are obviously going to be the worst party. Whereas when it comes to Conservatives, I think everyone in my audience can think of at least one Tory MP that they think, yeah, actually, they're a decent person. I wouldn't mind them in charge of the country. Whereas Labour is full of either student politics communists or absolutely useless politicians like Keir Starmer who can't convert or win if he wanted to. So yes, let's hope this momentum keeps up, and let's hope Rishi doesn't react with the same style of advert, because there's absolutely no need to. Labour are shooting themselves in the foot. The best thing the Tories can do is allow them to keep shooting with their Tommy gun. But what's the white pill in all this? Well, the white pill in all this is, ironically, as someone from the Labour Party said in the previous article, we're talking about law and order again, and what Labour think flanking from the right means is saying, put paedophiles in jail for longer, be tougher on crime, and close tax loopholes and lower taxes. They're all things I want. The problem Labour have is that they are so bad at this type of thing, and their recent history shows they have no intention of doing any of that. But what the hope is that the Tories will go, a lot of people are seeing these adverts and they like the messaging, they just don't like the fact that it is a personal attack on people. And then you'd hope from that they get the message of, right, let's lower taxes, let's be tougher on crime, and let's get the streets of Britain safe, because at the end of the day, that's what all these posters are trying to say. They're just saying it in a really stupid and self-destructive way for the Labour Party. So, you know, things are still going to get worse. It's the clown decade after all. But this, I think, is where we're going to find mush. Both the Tories and Labour need to start trying to flank each other on the right when it comes to law and order with things like this. The next thing we need to do when they're getting harder on law and order is to ironically have them less hard on law and order when it comes to hate crimes and things like that. But Labour aren't quite at that point yet. But let's try and take these wins where we can. We can lock up paedophiles for longer, and hopefully there'll be less knife and gun crime on the streets. If we can get both those things, then this whole ordeal has been a win. But given this is the clown decade, absolutely anything can happen, so I won't hold my breath. But I always like to find these little white pills for you so you can carry on with your week in quite a safe peace of mind. But anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.